Alright, in this video I'm getting into recommended reading for industrial music reading, and industrial music culture. The first book I'm going to get into is Microbionic by Thomas Bay William Bailey. This version is the revised version. I'm not sure what the difference is between the original version and the revised version. However, this gets into a very basic history of industrial music, as well as noise music and a few other genres as well. Radical electronic music and sound art in the 21st century. So anything that kind of steps outside of the usual electronic music genre. And I would say this is a solid first dive into industrial music, and I think that this can give you a little bit of a entry into what industrial music is, where it came from, who the bands were, and all of that kind of stuff. This is what I'd recommend if you're just trying to get into industrial music and want a little bit of the history. The second book I'm going to recommend is Assimilate by Alexander Alexander Reed. It is a critical history of industrial music. I would say if you've read Microbionic and you're wanting a bit of a deeper dive into the history of industrial music, this is a critical history of industrial music, and I think this would be a nice step into a little bit more of the details of industrial music. And interestingly enough, Alexander Reed, if I'm not mistaken, he did his PhD thesis on industrial music. This is how he got his PhD, and at the very end of the book it's very interesting because he comes to a conclusion which I completely agree with, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but I think his conclusion is very interesting and something that I always thought, and he just put it into words. So the next book I recommend is Records of Civilization by Simon Ford. I do not own a physical copy of this, I own a digital copy. While Records of Civilization is essentially about Coombe Transmissions, which was the artist collective that came before Throbbing Gristle, and then Coombe eventually turned into Throbbing Gristle. And if you don't know, Throbbing Gristle is the pioneering band of industrial music. They were kind of the ones that started industrial music, and it was Throbbing Gristle and Monty Kazaza who coined the term industrial music for industrial people, which is where the genre name came from for industrial music. It was that term, and it was the way that the band was creating music and the ideas that they were utilizing, and that's kind of where industrial music came from. And this book, Records of Civilization by Simon Ford, is about Coombe Transmissions and Throbbing Gristle, and it gives you a deeper look into their history and how they got started. I would say it's a little bit deeper than Assimilate because it gets into more specifics as far as who Throbbing Gristle is, how they evolved or how they were evolving at the time, and also their artist collective that came before Throbbing Gristle, Coombe Transmissions, and how that evolved into Throbbing Gristle. And I would say the reason why I recommend this book is because, granted, it's only about Throbbing Gristle and Coombe Transmissions. However, I do feel it's essential reading because they were the ones who started the whole industrial music, and they even had their own record label called Industrial Records Limited, if I'm not mistaken, and that's kind of where this whole thing started. And I think as you're getting deeper into the culture and the scene, this would be considered essential reading. The next book I'm going to recommend is Research number 6 and 7, Industrial Culture Handbook. If you are a serious industrial music fan, or just really want to know about more of the history and who was involved in all the bands and all the artists and all the performance artists, as well as like some of the people that were building machines and stuff that were made to destroy each other and all that kind of stuff, this would be the book to get. This was published by Research Publications. Rivethead was the one that interviewed all the different bands and stuff that are in this book and put it to paper. This happens to be a collector's edition. It's hardcover. There is a soft cover, but I think it's a little bit more rare, and it's harder to find the soft cover This is a limited edition hardcover. I'm not sure they have any left at Research Publications, but you might want to check if you're wanting to grab this, because there's only limited numbers of these. So, but this book has like Throbbing Gristle. There's references to reading references that the bands give, reading recommendations that they give. They give recommendations as far as what to read to get you in that mindset of transgressive culture and all that kind of stuff. Some of it's very interesting. Some of this I've read. I haven't read all of it, but there's stuff by Aleister Crowley included. There's, I think, yeah, let me just see here. 7 Dadaist manifestos. If you're not familiar with industrial music quite yet, you will come to know that industrial music was influenced by Dadaism, and obviously they would recommend Dadaist literature in this reading recommendation. But there's all kinds of stuff. Monty Kazaza's in here. William Burroughs, non-controversial figure for definitely. Sword-Eyed Sentimental, which was a French fanzine or magazine that covered a lot of industrial music stuff. Yeah, lots of stuff in here. This is one of those things that if you're really into industrial music, if you're a big fan of industrial music, this would be considered recommended. Granted, the original pressing of this came out I think in the 80s. The original publication date is I think somewhere in the 80s, but this is definitely essential. The final book I'm going to recommend in this video is Così fan tutt's Art, Sex, Music. And the reason why I'm recommending this is because Così fan tutti, if you don't know, was one of the original members of Throbbing Gristle as well as Coombe Transmissions, and she's the mother or the grandmother of industrial music. Her and Throbbing Genesis P-Orge, Peter Sleazy Christopherson, and Chris Carter were the ones who started Throbbing Gristle. This book gets very deep into Coombe Transmissions and how that all of that transpired, and then it gets into Throbbing Gristle and how that played out, and it also gets into some of her childhood as well as into her later years. I found this book highly inspiring because, for me, I really like seeing, what the bands did, what the people involved did, and it's very interesting to see her thought processes and her work ethic and stuff like that. Granted, she is definitely a workaholic. I think, from what I understand, she's not as much of a workaholic these days because it was starting to affect her physical health. But it's still highly inspiring just to see what they did, what it took for them to get industrial music and her art as well out in the world and to be recognized. And yeah, so this is the final book I'm recommending, Art, Sex, Music by Così fan tutti. That's it for this video. I will be doing another one with other recommendations. I think if you've gone through this entire list, you've read each book, I think if you're looking for other recommendations, I would say start reading autobiographies by people within the scene like Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, Al Jorgensen, Chris Connolly. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. If you feel it has value, please share it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. And if you like what's on this channel, please subscribe and to be notified when the next video comes out. So see you in the next video.